All right, welcome to the Two Sons Podcast. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I hope all of you guys are spending some time with some family or hanging out, laying low, having some good food, relaxing, watching some football. No NBA games, as I learned yesterday.
When you got the day off, Jay.
Well, I actually had yesterday off and today and the next day and the next 2 days, which even when I went to Alaska, I didn't take 5 days in a row. So this is gonna be interesting.
That's odd timing,
I'm not gonna know
right?
what to do with myself for a little while.
Well, I know, and I've got some time off too with the new job,
Hell
right?
yeah,
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
And you and I were talking about maybe going camping, but it is freezing
Dude,
cold.
it is so damn cold.
So maybe we should not go camping. Maybe we should do like golfing instead.
Well, hey, I'm down for that. I actually played a little bit of golf yesterday with my brother-in-law, and it was just I only played 9 holes, which I've only played 9 holes the last 3 times I've played, which
That's
is
the way
like
to do it.
Perfect, man.
Yeah.
It's literally perfect.
That is literally the way to do it. I think we should make that a thing.
Absolutely.
Make 9-hole golf a thing.
Start building 12-hole golf courses.
Yeah, or 12 holes, yeah. Many wives across the United States would be stoked with a 12-hole golf course.
Dude,
yeah.
could you imagine? So Luke is just getting ready to head up the road to Phoenix with his wife here in about an hour to spend the day up there for Thanksgiving. My wife and I are hosting here. My entire family is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, hanging out with all of my extended family because, dirty little secret, my parents met in the Midwest and they both moved down and met each other in Dallas with their whole families moved down. And so all of our extended families there. And I've gone there.
Wow.
I've gone there, I'd say in my 31 years of life, I've gone there probably like 27, 28 of the 31 years.
Wow.
So it's very unusual for me to not be out there, but it's just
sad.
It's become one of those things too where like logistically it's just impossible because it's in the heart of NBA season. And then also I didn't expect to have this entire stretch off. Yeah. And then also my wife works in retail. So like they have Black Friday, they have Small Business Saturday. There's a bunch of stuff there that keeps them busy. Anyway.
So and unfortunately, that little fact about your family has made you into a Dallas Cowboys fan.
Yes.
Which is probably one of the biggest plagues of your life.
Which puts me in a pretty good spot right about now, which is like, there's a cycle with being a Dallas Cowboys fan. It's the slow burn of excitement and then the sudden crash of disappointment at
opposed to a Cardinals fan where it's just like, hey, we got this kick-ass new quarterback, he's gonna do great, and then he just dumps in the bed 2 seasons in a row.
Exactly. Well, you know that feeling when you're a Patriots fan and you're like, oh my gosh, Tom Brady, minute and 20 left,
we're good,
it's like, oh, Bill Belichick, we need to make some critical decisions here, we should be okay. It's like I'm actively looking at the screen like I wonder how Mike McCarthy's going to screw this up because like I wouldn't be surprised if crayons were one of the meals that he's going to be eating for Thanksgiving this year. That might have been too far.
Anyways, this is a podcast about Star Wars, and right now we're talking about Andor, which was the final episode.
Yes.
Or as Jason would like to say, the episode after the penultimate episode.
The subsequent episode to the penultimate episode.
That's the most efficient way to say final.
That makes me sound more and more like a douchebag.
Yeah, and by the way, this is a morning episode, so coffee is back, unfortunately, instead of beer.
He does. It's a holiday, though, and Luke has some Baileys in his coffee.
What?
For the holiday.
People aren't supposed to know.
What's funny is, like, okay, one last story before we get into Star Wars-related stuff. So I won't do, like, when it comes to me and alcohol, like, I love a good beer, as you know. You and I, that's been one of the things that you and I have always enjoyed doing is trying new beers.
It's a pastime.
Last year we did an advent calendar where we had a German beer every single day.
Right.
And I've enjoyed that kind of thing. Coffee to me is like sacred, and I love the way it tastes. And like I don't want that like little bit of alcohol taste in my coffee. So like I
totally
hate using
understandable.
Baileys.
Yeah, no, I totally understandable. Like it's definitely less enjoyable. I'm not gonna lie.
Like if you and I were starting a good day drink right now,
yeah,
I would have and you were like, hey, dude, you got to have a drink with me while I have my Baileys. I'd have been like, what am I shooting? And then I'll just drink my coffee.
I would rather drink straight vodka than Baileys in my coffee.
So funny. All right, so the plan is we're gonna do we're going to cover the season finale of Andor today, and then next week we'll have a day where in the evening sometime we'll have a couple beers and we will kind of talk more about the grand scheme of Star Wars after this, because there's a lot to get into.
Definitely.
And then, dude, I'm begging you to get going on okay, the third Thrawn book in the Ascendancy trilogy is very much like almost Revenge of the Sith-esque, in the sense that like everything that's happening is monumentally important.
I see.
To everything.
Okay.
And it's
I'll get
like,
to it.
Yeah, I was last night, because my sleep schedule's all screwed up with work, and I was listening to the audiobook last night, and I listened to it from about 10:30 to about midnight. And I'm not even halfway. And there's like monumental events that are happening,
like
that,
big picture,
big
Star Wars.
Events.
That's what we love. That's what we absolutely love, when
Yes.
things get linked, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll get to it. I promise. I promise.
And I'm very, very excited to get into that with you, because like I can't even like the amount of random Star Wars joy that I've gotten out of Thrawn in these 5.5 books.
Jason and Luke, Thrawn freaks.
Thrawn freaks.
No, we really are. Like we really are. We're like, when is Thrawn going to show up in Andor?
Which, by the way, Thrawn did not show up in
yeah,
Andor.
not even close.
Not yet.
Also, another area where we were wrong is B2EMO did not do some crazy R2D2 stuff. He literally just played a hologram. So I was completely wrong about that.
Well, you know what'll be interesting on the Andor front with Thrawn, and because like we know in next year that we're gonna have an Ahsoka series that will probably release before this, before Thrawn makes an appearance in Rebels, if he does, which I believe he will.
You mean in Andor?
In Andor,
yeah.
So what's interesting about that is you and I have spent a lot of time talking about the dichotomy between like the way Thrawn is portrayed in the books versus the show.
Right, and how it's a little bit different.
Yeah, and like in the books he's such a benevolent character.
Right.
And then in the show he has a little more of an evil tinge.
Mm-hmm.
Which means it's all like in all likelihood the first time we see Thrawn, he'll be more of a good character.
I hope so.
When Ahsoka finds him, which I think will be really interesting.
I really hope so.
Anyway, you guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the YouTube channel, please, so that you guys don't miss any more of our shows. And then there's a little link tree underneath the video where you can find all of our social media feeds and stuff. If you guys could follow us there, we would sincerely appreciate it. So this episode's pretty simple.
It is.
There is a couple of drop-ins on Mon Mothma. Not a whole lot happening. She has a fake taxi argument.
Yeah.
Where she makes up gambling. And you know, it's funny because I couldn't figure out what was happening while it was happening. And Carly figured it out immediately. And
really?
She's only seen like half the episodes.
Yeah, I watched it. So I watched the episode twice, actually. I watched it last night, and then I was dead tired last night. I had just gotten off my shift. And so I kind of skimmed through it this morning, and I put emphasis on watching that taxi conversation. And the second time that I watched it is when it hit me. Because essentially they needed to wrap that part of the story up for now, right? That's such a huge gaping important area of this series is what is happening with Mon Mothma's money, and poor Perrin just gets sucked into the mix, man.
Dude, yeah, and he you know, it's funny because like at first I was like, man, Mon Mothma she's not only a good actor in real life, but she's a good actress in real life. She's a good actress in this fake world, because like she was selling it pretty hard. And,
it was genius.
And she was portraying a good amount of annoyance, and I was like, that's interesting. And then Carly's like, oh yeah, she's faking it. She's doing that to hide the money. And then I was like, oh, right, okay.
It was super. Yeah, it was just incredible. The acting was insane throughout this episode in particular. Like, on my way over here, I was actually thinking about all the different actors that literally just knocked it out, right? Like you see, his name's Brazo, I think.
The big guy.
The big guy when Maarva is pretty much saying her manifesto, and he's just like looking up into the sky, like listening to her. The kid who makes that bomb, that was when he was listening to her, and when his like eyes are like swollen, and when he's crying, that was some of the best acting I think I've ever seen. And then Bix, she's like stuck in her cell, and she's like wording what she hears like her community around her saying, like just the acting, and then Mon Mothma, like that acting was incredible, right? So it's
she's been she's been the star of the show, I think.
Yeah, the acting has just been spot on, and it's just and they did such a good job of just showing how how important and monumentous this time in Star Wars is. Even the dude who gave up Cassian coming back, the guy who was getting paid by the Empire, like even him, he's sitting there listening to like all the happenings around him with Maarva's manifesto, and you can even tell that there's a point where he's just like, oh damn, I made a mistake, as he's just sitting there surrounded by the Empire, right? Yeah. It's just unparalleled.
I need to rewatch that scene again too, because there was so much going on.
Yeah,
and like half of your brain is engaged in what's going to happen next.
Right. Well, and there's so much to like unpack with the acting too. Like it reminded me of almost like Inglourious Bastards, where like every single scene has like a special context, and people are saying stuff on the outside, and then the acting's so good that you can tell that there's like a subcontext happening. Mm-hmm. It's really cool.
Yeah. So there's a slow burn there. You're watching everybody fill into the space. So the ISB basically goes like, yeah, they asked for 30. We gave them, or we offered them 30. We ended up giving them 40 when the Daughters of Ferrix complained.
Yeah.
We're leaving the outside loose and open because we want to bait Andor into showing up.
Right.
And at first you're focused on all of like these other moving parts, like Luthen's there, which it turns out Luthen, like, let's talk about that for a second. Like, I thought Luthen was like completely shook by what happened. And like it was like he showed up to go get Cassian,
right?
And I don't think that trip could have gone any more different for him than what he expected, because
right.
I think it appeared to weigh heavily on him, the cost of the rebellion,
right?
Because I mean, like, here's the deal: this was like presumably 40 or 50 like innocent civilians were shot dead in the streets, like just including old ladies and shit like that were just getting like just executed on the street by blaster. So like a part of you, like, it almost seemed like a little bit of like a Luthen. It was almost like he was completely overwhelmed with just like the scale of the people that are on his side in all of this, the cost of it all,
right? And
then of course at the end when Cassian, like, such a power move, like, there's my gun, dude, kill me,
right?
Or take me in.
And it was kind of cool because Luthen's such a stoic character the entire season, right? And then pretty much the last scene, we just see him smiling, right? Just a huge smile on his face because he's amped about, I think, number one, the way that he obtained Cassian as a teammate, and just also I think he truly realized how important Cassian would be to the rebellion.
Of course,
Cassian obviously is a powerhouse, right? So it was kind of fun.
Tells him he broke out of prison, man.
Yeah, I know,
because I don't think Luthen even knows about.
You're exactly right. Yeah, so
broke out of Imperial prison.
Yes, check. Started a war later on, though. That's coming up. Yeah, so that scene was really interesting too. Just to see Luthen happy made me happy, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This was a cool episode on a bunch of different levels. You talked about the deeply impactful nature of it, like,
yeah. Nemik's manifesto, right?
Yeah. Well, so what I was thinking of in particular right now, because I think Nemik's manifesto is kind of like a major crescendo in this, the back-to-back speeches from Nemik and from Maarva. But like, there's a moment where Cassian's talking to the big guy, which is Brazo, yeah. And when he's talking to Brazo's like kind of sharing Marva's last words with him.
Yeah,
and in that moment,
I forgot about that.
She actually says the phrase. She says to him something along the lines of like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something along the lines of like, hey, like, there's going to be somebody who breaks this dam.
Yeah.
And that could be you, because you could be an unstoppable force for good if we could find a way to combine your passion with the right cause and your abilities. Like, you could. It was a very like interesting motivational speech. And what's funny is like Carly immediately was like, isn't he the one that like she's referencing Rogue One. But like we talked a lot about this over the course of the show, the way that the rebellion hangs by a thread throughout the entire show, like them barely escaping Hoth, like them almost not being able to get the shield generator down on Andor, like all of these things that are just hanging on by a thread. Well, it's like, simply put, the Death Star shows up to Yavin 4 and just destroys the Rebel base, if not for Cassian and what him and his team did on Scarif.
Right.
He was in a lot of ways like, there's all these like little escalations, right? So like obviously the Luthen's first raid is like kind of like the first real open attack on an Imperial facility, right? That leads to the ISB tightening up security. That's why they end up beating Anto Krieger in that one conflict, right? But then you have, it's like the dude, literally Brazo after Maarva's speech, like going up and just kicking the garrison leader right in the head, just boom, like, and like you're like, oh, well, that's an escalator, and then it's the kid heaves the damn pipe bomb.
I know.
Which then sets off like basically their entire crates, all their crates of hand grenades and stuff.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it's like, oh shit! Like
it happened fast.
Yeah, and then it was like, it was interesting too, because like you could kind of see the pathway of the escalation, because even after the kick to the guy's face,
right,
the Empire wasn't going to open fire. They had riot shields. They were like, we're just going to
I thought that was a really interesting point, that they made a point to do that. And it just kind of it made the Empire feel like just a classic, like legitimate government.
Yeah,
right?
like a fascist government. Just dude, the Nazi parallels continue to just be
unreal. I wasn't gonna bring it up because like so many times I had brought it up in other episodes. I'm like, I cannot keep talking about Nazis on our podcast.
It's clearly something they're trying to do. It
totally is.
They are painting the Empire as a fascist government that is out of control.
And not only that, not only like the idea of what the Empire is, but like they got white dudes with blonde hair to lead garrisons.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, might as well play a part.
Like that dude and Deidre could not look more like German, with like super light skin and like just blonde hair. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this is ridiculous. I'm not going to bring this up, but here I am.
Yeah, well, hey, I think you got to bring it up. I mean, look, Nazis are they're an especially uncomfortable topic these days in light of all the Kyrie Irving stuff and all of the like Holocaust denialism and stuff that's out there. But that said, it's a clear like line that the directors and the creators of the show are trying to draw, and it makes sense to me. Like the idea is oppression leads. Like think about what the Nazis did.
Right.
They unified the globe against them. Like people
don't do that.
People in other like we sent U.S. soldiers on ships to board beaches,
right,
and run into gunfire to stop this dude
because it was that bad.
Because he was that bad. And you know what's funny is like because my brother's in the military and you have a brother that's in the military, and we talked a lot about like one of the ways that we would talk about the Ukraine-Russia conflict is like, at what point would you be willing to send your brother to war for something like that? And
that's a good threshold to think about.
Been very clear, like, no, I would not send my brother to stop Putin right now. Like I just wouldn't do it. And it's like, but it's like, can you imagine in the 1940s, like at a certain point, like you and I would look at each other and be like, we got to stop this.
We got to, yeah. Well, and you're talking about how, so like different areas of the globe joined forces in order to take out one group. That's essentially what Nemec's manifesto was about. Not to get stuck on that, but he was talking about, he's like, okay, you think you're doing your skirmishes or whatever here. He's like, this is happening across the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people are being brought to their boiling point. And he's like, you are the forefront of this rebellion, which was really, really cool to think about. It's like, if you want to be a rebel, you could literally start that anywhere in the galaxy.
What it was the specific thing that he said? He was like, freedom is natural.
Yeah,
it was something like that, and it was like it inevitably will take place. Like essentially,
it was cool.
Essentially, the whole, it seemed to me like the entire like kind of purpose of his particular speech was like, inevitably, as tyranny constricts.
Which is unnatural.
They do that out of fear, which is that was one of his main points. Was like they do it out of fear, and inevitably, as they constrict, like the power of the freedom like grows. And
exactly.
And then he basically said like somebody will eventually poke a hole in it, and then there will be a rush. And that's
Right.
literally like kind of like, you know, it's almost like a pyramid type of concept where like each successive move from the rebellion was more and more grandiose, you know, from, okay, we robbed them to, okay, now we're kicking a garrison leader in the head to like, okay, now we're in like an open combat in the middle of the streets where like we're mauling like dark troopers and stuff on the ground. And then now we're, you know, launching X-Wings to attack and kill, Imperial engineers. Now we're literally sending the rebel fleet to knock out a shield gate over a major, like literally like we got to go back and do a whole Rogue One thing at some point too.
Oh, I want to break down Rogue One so bad.
Oh yeah, we got to do that because like it's got to carry so much more weight now that because like now that Mon Mothma's in there, Cassian's in there, all these guys are a part of that. But I did think I wanted to talk about the build up because like so there's this interesting moment in like a third of the way through the episode where all of a sudden the dude just starts hitting the anvil.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And everyone's like,
that was early.
They're just like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And it's not like he's hitting it to a couple of times to signify the end of the day. Like he's just perpetually like hammering on this thing. And all the dudes in the Imperial garrison are like, what is going on? And they're like, we don't know. And then suddenly, like, you see the marching and you're like, oh, this is a lot more than 40.
Right.
You know, and then immediately our little Aryan Brotherhood blonde guy is like, we need to show force. Like, get everybody in the garrison out there. Like, we need to get set up. And you're like, okay, here we go. This is going to start to escalate quickly. Right. And it was really cool because, you know, for Maarva, we joked in the episode after the original conflict that took place that led to the Cyril's disgrace. We talked about how Maarva is almost like kind of cute with her like
look, small
she's
little
a rebel.
Yeah,
like,
she's a rebel.
And like
now eat your dinner.
Well, Bix I think tells us like she keeps going and making sure that this particular like gate is open
to let the rebels in.
The rebels want to
the rebels
yeah
that are trying to infiltrate, you know, Ferrix, which anybody could just walk right in.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So you're sitting there and you're like, oh, this is so adorable. And then her speech, like, you know, it's a really delicate balance because this droid shooting Maarva's face up into the sky in this huge hologram could have gone cheesy so fast,
right?
And like it needed to be a certain type of speech with a certain amount of weight that needed to have a certain amount of build up. It kind of reminds me of a lot of the stuff we talked about with Game of Thrones, where it's like the moment works because of the build up,
right?
And the speech has this like. Her speech was really simple. Like she's like, yeah, like I get it. I'm dead. So it doesn't really make a ton of sense for me to be like telling you guys like, oh, you should fight.
Right.
But let me be clear. Like if I was alive, I'd be fighting these bastards.
I know.
Like it was the only moment in the entire season where like I legit was like, I swept up in it. And I was like, this is a really cool moment.
And it was cool because she made some parallels about what the Empire was. Mm-hmm. So I mean, she talked about like a festering, unhealing wound, which, you know, it just hit home as a healthcare provider. No,
she kept subtly hinting more and more at
the Empire, and then finally she just says it.
Yeah,
right?
By the end, she's like, these mother effers.
And then she gave the parallel of like Rust. That was like infiltrating something and how it wasn't there to visit anymore and it's there to stay. And the only thing I could think about is some poor soul just sitting in the Midwest, you know, just their house is blanketed in snow and they've been driving on salty, you know, nasty roads and their cars just rusting out. Yeah. And like that's like their perception of like what the Empire is and just the blanketing nature of what the Empire was turning into. But I agree that was not cheesy for me at all. There was only one time throughout this episode that like I kind of got removed from the Star Wars universe. And that was Vel's running Vel, did you notice that?
Oh, when she was sprinting through the
She's
smoke.
like sprinting. He's like, Vel, is this the first time you've ever run? Like, why are
It
you
was
running?
it was very
was like,
rigid.
yeah.
Well, like inevitably, whenever they ask actors and actresses to do anything physical, it's always a crapshoot as to what you're going to get.
I was like, just don't have that.
And you got to think like imagine like the people when you were in high school that were in theater class. Like, not that there's anything wrong with them, but they usually weren't they weren't usually the athletic.
No, I'm not attacking.
Luke's over here criticizing running form, by the way.
No, but that's like, okay, so like this is what we do. Like we like break down the episode, right, and then only good things to say. But it's just like there was literally just one time when I was just like, oh, that's a little distracting. It was her running. Like in contrast, though, the amount of detail that they put into this was absolutely incredible.
Of course.
After watching the episode, I looked into a little bit of the dogs that they use, like the junkyard dogs.
Yes.
So those are called Carillion hounds, and I think the reason why they're called Carillion hounds is because we see them in Solo for the first time on Corellia. Okay. Mm-hmm. And did you know that inside those dogs, they actually have real dogs?
Really?
Yes.
That's awesome.
So it cracked me up. This morning I was like looking into it, right? And I pop up a picture on Google, and there's literally 2 Carillion hounds without the heads, and Dobermans are just standing in there, just chilling, just couldn't be happier to be doing their job.
That's so funny.
The other detail that I thought was really cool is when the kid is making his pipe bomb, they added the fact that it was just bitter cold where he was working, right? Mm. So like he had the hologram of his dad, and that was like feeling his passion to make this pipe bomb, and almost he knew he was putting his life at risk. And then they had him, you could see his breath like as he was making the pipe bomb. It's like, man, this kid is alone, he's cold, and the Empire's put him into this corner where he has nothing else to do other than fight them.
Dude,
which is really cool.
Take things away from people, they have nothing to lose.
Exactly.
Dude, that was, it's such a, like, the barrier that stops people from doing things that are risky is you having something to lose. Yeah. Like, for instance, like
that's a good point.
If you've taken good care of your money and you got a good job, and you're not going to be risky with your investments.
Right.
But like, it's that guy who's like on his last penny, who's lost loved ones, who, right. If you wrong that dude,
yep.
Like there's no telling what he might do. You know
right.
what I mean?
Right.
And I think it's kind of like, because I don't think we'd seen that kid in an earlier episode.
No, we had. I think in the backgrounds.
In the
stuff.
background,
like, he was not. I
vaguely recognized him, but he hadn't like talked or anything.
Right? Yeah, he wasn't like a super important character.
But they clearly went out of their way in the early part of this episode to like explain that like he is another severely wronged party.
Right.
Who and
those
like,
are stacking up.
Oh, he probably killed like at least a dozen.
He got after
it. There was the whole garrison was out there, and I mean those crates all exploded. Like at least a dozen people must have died.
Yeah.
When that happened.
And not only that, but there was that huge weapon on the. It was almost like a tank, but it wasn't. And that thing was blasting people. Like when they would get hit by that, they'd go like, I don't know, 7 yards.
Well, the escalation was interesting because like the captain gets kicked in the face, and then he crawls through the riot shields, right?
Right.
And then he is the one who's like, open fire at will.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, shit, you know, and like
this is a big deal.
Oh, dude, and it's like it was like shooting fish in a barrel. Yeah. All those dudes that were up top, and like. And Star Wars special effects have come a long way. Which, by the way, I was laughing so hard. I'm watching with Carly last night, and the Carillion hounds are there, and she's like, "That's really bad CGI." I'm like, "Those are puppets, honey."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, I know it's weird. I was like, but in the Star Wars universe, that's better somehow. Like,
right. It is
hard
better
to explain,
dude.
But that.
That's good. That's what we like.
The fact that it looks cheesy like a puppet is intentional, and it's exactly what we want.
When the Lambda shuttle came in and landed, that was a little bit cheesy as well, and in the best way possible.
Oh, dude.
It reminded me of when it's going to, in the original trilogy, when that Lambda shuttle's like going to land on Andor. Andor. Jeez, those are close.
And AT is walking next to the
platform. and it kind of looks like very CGI, very very cheesy, and it's just Star Wars.
Dude, that
so
is
awesome.
Star Wars. It's totally Star Wars.
That skirmish leads into Cyril and Deidre having their moment, and that scene.
I'm so glad they didn't kiss. By the way,
I am too.
I was like, they were staring into each other's eyes way too long.
I know,
and I was like, no, don't do this. This is gonna be so awkward.
Number one, the acting in that was incredible too, but that scene made it feel like there's definitely gonna be a lot more Andor to see, because they worked so hard on developing that odd relationship between the two of them, that there has to be more of that relationship that we see. And I wonder if Cyril finally gets invited to work for the Empire or not. But obviously Cyril's completely in love with Deidre, or Dedra, however you want to say it. And then it almost seems like she was like kind of into him for a half second. I don't know.
I think
she was.
I think she was really shook up.
She was definitely shook.
She was really shook up.
Yeah.
And I think she legitimately feared for her life, because like there was a moment there where like she was just trying to get out,
right,
and just trying to get her gun and get out, and like every time she'd try to like get up and get her momentum going, somebody would just knock her,
kick her in
ass.
the face.
Yeah.
I know.
And so like I think she was scared shitless, and then literally Cyril like kind of I think she just had a moment there where she really saw him for a second.
Right.
I agree. I think this show is heading 3 or 4 seasons or plus.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be a heavily invested in Star Wars show from a standpoint of like, because it's low budget. All these Star Wars shows now are low budget because of the fact that they've got that big studio. That's the big circle that's got all the LCD screens on it. That's where all these are getting filmed now. So like, it's really, you're just paying actors, right, and tech people, right? And like the sets are not overly complicated. And so like they can drag this out with just building the characters up, and the amount of effort they put into the character development is really cool. Like for instance, it's like you're getting ready for this funeral, and here's Cyril in a transport with his buddy from the first episode. And like they're like trying on each other's hats.
I know.
And you're just
I was trying so hard to figure out what was going on. I'm like, okay, what do the hats mean? I think
my theory is Cyril wanted to wear the military hat again. And so
as a military hat?
Yeah,
I didn't pick up on that.
Because it was the dude's hat, because he works for the the system defense or whatever.
But he works for that smelting company, you wanted to wear a smelter hat.
Yeah, I wanted to wear the smelter hat. But you're like, look at these two cheesy dudes. Like, they're like, these two idiots are going to show up and screw everything up. Of course, they didn't actually screw anything up. Cyril actually saved the day. But like, you're watching that and you're like, that's like, I literally looked over at Carly immediately and I was like, that's something you haven't seen in Star Wars in a while, which
There's
is
so
like,
much build up.
Like just character development to that scale, which to me, again, like you and I have constantly talked about, that means so much more than anything.
It means so much more than some cheesy hyperspace skipping, lightspace skipping scene.
In Thrawn, like Cheery, a really cool character,
right?
That they've developed, that they've built up over all 3 of these books,
right?
And you're like in like now in the 3rd book, she's playing a bigger role, and you're just like, oh, like dude, this is cool. Like you're invested in Cheery.
It's cool
because of like all of that time that it builds the
Cheery's a character in Thrawn, by the way. Cheery's not a descriptor word.
Yes, Thrawn references and Bane references are going to pop up.
I'm not going to go into detail. We'll say this for the next episode, but you and I had talked about how Star Wars needs to get out of this era, and I was pleasantly surprised with how interested I am in the Rebel era.
Oh,
this
dude,
point.
I hope they continue.
Yeah, this show made me have more faith in the fact that there is more story to be told in this era, and that we don't have to go into like a High Republic era or like a Sith development era. Well, or we could. I think that we have the option of staying in this time frame.
Yeah, I want to dive deeper into this topic
we'll do that
another
next
day.
Yeah,
but I think there are 2 specific things that are worth, I'll say 3 specific things that are worth diving further into in this era. I really think they can continue to build around Jedi stories that surround the end of the Old Republic. Kind of like Tales of the Jedi with Dooku.
Right.
I think they can do more Clone Wars type stories that surround Jedi Padawan missions and stuff like that.
Okay.
I think Rebellion, but not just in the early phases, but also in the middle phases.
Right.
And then I absolutely think that Ahsoka getting together with Thrawn and potentially going after the Grisks or something like that.
Oh, that'd be so cool. Tight. Yeah.
Those are areas that I would be down for. But like, yeah, I think that the Skywalker timeline though is kind of
so done.
Is played out.
It's so done to the fact, or to the point. It's so done to the level, is what I'm trying to say, that we're literally calling people who are not Skywalkers.
Yes, exactly.
Ray is criminal number one.
Who else can we make a Skywalker? So before we call it a day, because I know we need to get you on the road soon, you had a couple of details that you wrote down, particularly, I think the only one we missed is the music. Do you want to talk about that for a sec?
I love the music in Star Wars so much. I won't go into details now. We'll save it for the next episode too. But I don't know if it was me just wanting this to be the case because I tried to look into it, and I don't know if anybody else really mentioned it online. Maybe it's a little bit too early because the episode was just released, yesterday. Mm-hmm. But the band, when they were warming up, number one, it was cool because the people who were playing those instruments, I don't know if they were real or fake, but whoever it was that they had playing it, I think were actual musicians, because the way that the trumpet players were holding their instruments, the way that they were holding their mouths,
they looked competent.
They looked competent, especially with the flute players. But
the random Star Wars spin on marching band.
Yeah, and I was just like, this is dope. And then they're just seeing their instruments and just how creative, the artists were who created those were really neat. But it sounded like so one of the most famous Star Wars songs next to the Imperial March is by John Williams. It's called Binary Sunset, which is envision Luke Skywalker on Tatooine, staring off into the distance with two suns.
I know exactly what song you're talking about.
Yeah, and during the time when the band was warming up, they actually had tunes, melodies, and notes from that song.
It sounded a little bit.
It sounded exactly like it, and it was it sounded very intentional. And again, it was just another keynote on how much detail was placed into this series, and I loved it.
The level of detail was insane. I'll have to. I'm definitely going to go back and rewatch this episode, and I'll pay closer attention.
Yeah,
to
it's
the music
super subtle. It is very subtle, and when you hear it, don't try and hear it. Don't try and listen to it. Your body will your ears will naturally just pick up the slight the slight melody and the slight tones and notes that are similar in both of those.
Mm-hmm. Did you have anything else from this episode?
That's it. I loved it.
All right, guys. That is all we have for today. Like I said, we'll be back next week, and we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into just how this kind of fits into... We like to talk about how it fits into the larger Star Wars universe, kind of zoom out from the show in general and talk about some of the larger themes, some of the things that we expect, and then hopefully Luke gets to work on Thrawn, because I'm really excited to talk about that one as well. As always, we sincerely appreciate your support. And we will see you next time. And also, don't forget to give us topics on things that you'd like us to talk about. Yes. We've been getting some really good comments. By the way, one of our viewers agrees with me that Luthen and that one chick are not lovers. Oh, yeah, so... but we will only find... In time, we will discover who was right in the Luthen lover saga. Mystery. Yeah. All right, thanks a lot, guys.